The Deltan slave girl screamed as the Zorgan whip tore open her back, splattering green blood across the public square. But this time, there was one witness to the brutal oppression that the Zorgan fought beneath them. Human freighter captain named Patrick Robinson. Patrick's fists clenched as he watched the sadistic spectacle. The young slave, named Odin, had merely dropped a crate, an innocent mistake that any exhausted, underfed worker might make, but to the Zorgan, it was an executable offense. Patrick had arrived on Delta Prime to deliver basic supplies and check on the Human Federation's interests. He had heard about the conquest of the Deltans during briefings, but seeing their reality in person flooded him with righteous anger. Before he could stop himself, he was charging toward the raised obsidian platform where Odin was being flayed alive. "Stop, you bastards," he roared, shoving through the stunned crowd. "She's just a kid." The Zorgan overseer turned slowly, his yellow eyes narrowing on the foolish human. "This meat is Zorgan property," he hissed. "Her correction is no business of yours, ape." "I'm making it my business," Patrick growled back, his hand inching toward the plasma pistol on his hip. But before he could even touch it, an arc of blue energy slammed into him. His body went rigid as the nerve beam overloaded his system, sending him crashing to the blood-soaked ground. The overseer loomed over Patrick's paralyzed form, sneering with triumph. "Sympathizing with slaves is a capital crime, human. You'll share this bitch's fate." A short, miserable life in chains followed by an agonizing death. As a dozen guards surrounded him and dragged him toward the slave pits, Patrick caught one last glimpse of Odin. Her pain-glazed eyes met his, and in that moment, a powerful, desperate connection passed between them. The human and the Deltan, both prisoners on a planet without mercy, both dreaming of freedom against crushing odds. The Zorgan lash cracked again, and fresh lines of emerald blood striped Odin's ravaged flesh. She didn't cry out this time. Something had shifted, a flickering ember of defiant hope that the human's futile intervention had stirred to life. Patrick didn't know it yet, but his act of instinctive decency was about to set in motion a cataclysmic upheaval. A revolution of slaves against masters, of the oppressed against the oppressors. At the center of it all was an unlikely alliance between a jaded freighter captain and an enslaved alien princess. A forbidden union that would shake an empire to its foundations. But first, they would both have to survive the Zorgan's brutal wrath. Shackled in the depths of a torture pit and awaiting execution, Patrick realized his life now depended on doing the impossible, forging a ragtag slave resistance to overthrow a planetary occupation and helping Odin unlock the power within her to fulfill her people's prophecy of liberation. The war for the future had just begun. Patrick half-dragged, half-carried Odin and Krell up the ramp of his battered freighter, the Zorgan whip still cracking behind them. The hatch slammed shut, and he punched the accelerator, the ship lurching into the dark sky. In the cargo hold, he sat the two Deltans down, handing them water pouches. Odin drank greedily, emerald blood still seeping from the lashes on her back. Patrick pulled out the medkit and started cleaning her wounds. "Why are you helping us?" Odin asked, her violet eyes searching his face. "You're not Deltan. You have no stake in our fight." Patrick met her gaze. "No one deserves to be treated like that. Enslaved, beaten. It's not right." Krell, the older male Deltan, leaned forward. "The Zorgan have ruled our world for decades with an iron fist. They see us as animals, as property to be used and discarded." As Patrick applied sealant to Odin's cuts, she told him of the mines where thousands toiled, the factories where Deltan children worked until they dropped, and the experimentation camps where Zorgan scientists used slaves as living test subjects. A once vibrant culture had been crushed beneath the boot of oppression. But there was a spark in Odin's eyes as she spoke of the resistance, the dreamers and fighters who kept the hope of freedom alive. Patrick found himself drawn to her strength, her unbroken spirit in the face of such suffering. Suddenly, proximity alarms blared. A Zorkin warship dropped out of warp, bearing down on them with predatory intent. Patrick leaped into the pilot's chair, hands flying across the controls. "Strap in," he yelled. "It's going to be a bumpy ride." The Zorkin ship opened fire, lances of plasma scorching past the view screen. Patrick wrenched the freighter into a gut-churning corkscrew, narrowly evading the barrage. An idea hit him. He diverted power to the cargo crane and snatched a freight container from the hold. As the Zorkin closed in, he released the container, letting it tumble into their path. It exploded against their shields, sending the warship reeling. Patrick punched the freighter's ancient warp drive, catapulting them to safety as the Zorkin vessel spun off, disabled by the unorthodox weapon. "That was incredible," Odin breathed as the stars stretched to infinity around them. "I've never seen anyone outfly a Zorkin war drone like that." Patrick grinned, adrenaline still singing in his veins. "Stick with me, kid. I'll show you a thing or two about freestyle cargo hauling." He set a course for Way Station Theta, remote outpost where they could catch their breath, and plan their next move. Along the way, he started teaching Odin and Krell the basics of aiming a blaster and throwing a punch. If they were going to free Delta Prime, they would need to know how to fight. During the long hours of training, Patrick and Odin talked, sharing pieces of their pasts. She asked him about Earth, marveling at his tales of soaring mountains and deep blue oceans, of a place where people walked free beneath an open sky. In turn, Patrick listened as Odin spoke of growing up in the slave pens, of the family she'd lost, and the defiant hope she clung to, the belief that her people would one day cast off their chains. He saw in her a strength and beauty that took his breath away, a soul that refused to be broken by the cruelty she'd endured. Slowly, tenderly, a bond took root between them, an understanding and affection that transcended the light. Way Station Theta was a forgotten outpost on the fringes of space, a place where smugglers and rebels could hide from the prying eyes of the galaxy's powers. It was here that Patrick brought Odin and Krell, hoping to find allies for their cause. The station was a dilapidated structure, its corridors dimly lit and filled with the scent of engine oil and stale air. But it was also a place of opportunity, a place where those who had been wronged by the Zorkin could gather their strength and fight back. As they disembarked, Patrick led the way through the labyrinthine corridors, his eyes scanning for any sign of danger. He had contacts here, people who might be willing to join their fight, but he also knew that trust was a rare commodity in a place like this. Odin followed closely, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and apprehension. This was a world she had never known, a place where the rules of her oppressed home didn't apply. But it was also a place where danger lurked around every corner, and she knew that their mission would not be easy. Krell, ever the watchful protector, kept a hand on his blaster, his gaze sweeping the shadows for any threat. He had survived this long by being cautious, and he wasn't about to let his guard down now. Patrick finally led them to a small, nondescript room at the back of the station. Inside, a group of beings from various species sat around a makeshift table, their faces hard and suspicious as they looked up at the newcomers. "Patrick," a grizzled old human said, standing up with a wary smile, "didn't expect to see you back here. What brings you to this part of the galaxy?" "I need your help," Zane Patrick replied, stepping forward, "and I think you'll want to hear what I have to say." Zane glanced at Odin and Krell, his eyes narrowing. "Who are they?" "Friends," Patrick said firmly. "They're from Delta Prime. The Zorkin have enslaved their people, and we're going to do something about it." The room fell silent as the weight of Patrick's words sank in. The Zorkin were a powerful enemy, and challenging them was no small feat. But the beings around the table had all suffered under the Zorkin's rule in one way or another, and the fire of rebellion burned in their hearts. "What's your plan?" Zane asked, his voice low. "We're going to build a resistance," Patrick said. "We're going to gather every ally we can find, every resource we can scrounge, and we're going to hit the Zorgon where it hurts. We're going to free Delta Prime." Zane studied Patrick for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You've got guts, I'll give you that. But it's going to take more than guts to take on the Zorgon. You'll need weapons, ships, and soldiers, more than we've got here." "We'll find them," Patrick said, his voice steady with determination. "We'll build an army out of the oppressed, the forgotten, and the ones who have nothing left to lose. The Zorgon think they can crush us, but they're wrong. We'll hit them where they least expect it, and we'll keep hitting them until they fall." The room buzzed with a new energy as the rebels exchanged glances, the seed of hope taking root in their hearts. They had been waiting for someone to ignite the spark of rebellion, and now it was here. Zane leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a renewed sense of purpose. "All right, Patrick, you've got my support, but we'll need more than just the people in this room. There are others out there who hate the Zorgon as much as we do. We need to find them and bring them into the fold." Patrick nodded. "Agreed. We'll split up, reach out to anyone who might join us. We'll gather weapons, supplies, and ships. And when we're ready, we'll strike." Odin, who had been silent until now, stepped forward, her voice firm. "I'll go with you. I know my people. They won't trust outsiders easily, but if they see me, they might join our cause." Patrick looked at her, admiration in his eyes. "You're brave, Odin, but this will be dangerous. The Zorgon won't take kindly to an uprising." Odin met his gaze with unwavering resolve. "I've been a slave my whole life, Captain. I've lived in danger every day. If there's a chance to free my people, I'll take it." Krell placed a hand on her shoulder, nodding in agreement. "We both will. Our people need us now more than ever." Patrick smiled, feeling a sense of pride in his unlikely companions. "Then it's settled. We'll divide our forces, gather our allies, and prepare for war. The Zorgon have ruled through fear for too long. It's time to show them what happens when that fear turns against them." With the plan in motion, the group dispersed, each with their own tasks to accomplish. Patrick, Odin, and Krell would travel to the far reaches of the galaxy, seeking out potential allies and rallying support for their cause. The others would work to secure weapons and ships, preparing for the inevitable conflict that lay ahead. As they prepared to leave Waystation Theta, Patrick took one last look at the outpost. Knowing that this might be the last time, he saw it in one piece. The war they were about to start would be bloody and brutal, but it was a war that needed to be fought. Odin stood beside him, her expression determined yet pensive. "Do you really think we can win?" she asked quietly. Patrick turned to her, his voice soft but confident. "I don't know what the future holds, Odin, but I do know one thing. We have to try. If we don't stand up to the Zorgon, who will? And if we don't try, we'll never know what we could have achieved." Odin nodded, the weight of his words settling on her shoulders. She had always believed that her people would one day be free, but now that the moment was upon them, the reality of what lay ahead was daunting. "Then we'll fight," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "For our people, for our future. We'll fight until the Zorgon Empire crumbles." Patrick placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "And I'll be right there beside you, every step of the way." Together, they boarded the freighter, the engines roaring to life as they prepared to embark on the next phase of their journey. The war for Delta Prime had just begun, and they were ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. As the stars streaked past the viewscreen, Odin felt a sense of hope she hadn't felt in years. They were no longer just slaves. They were warriors, rebels, and freedom fighters. And together, they would bring the Zorgon Empire to its knees. The freighter shot through hyperspace, its engines humming with the steady rhythm that had become almost comforting to its crew. Patrick, Odin, and Krell were heading toward one of the most dangerous regions of space, Zorgon-controlled territory. Their mission was simple but perilous: to ignite the fire of rebellion among the enslaved Deltans, and any other oppressed species under the Zorgon's cruel rule. They knew they couldn't do it alone. The Zorgon were a formidable force, with resources and soldiers spread across dozens of worlds. To have any chance of success, they needed to build an army, a coalition of the willing, united in their hatred of the Zorgon Empire. Their first stop was the planet Neros, a mining world where the Zorgon's brutal labor camps churned out the raw materials that powered their war machine. The planet was a barren wasteland, its surface scarred by massive quarries and industrial complexes that belched smoke and fire into the sky. As the freighter descended into the planet's atmosphere, Odin's heart pounded in her chest. She had never been to Neros, but she had heard the stories, the suffering, the cruelty, the relentless grind of the Zorgon's exploitation. She steeled herself for what they would find. Patrick brought the freighter down on the outskirts of one of the larger mining camps, using a narrow canyon to hide their approach. The plan was to slip into the camp, make contact with the local resistance, and spark an uprising that would spread across the planet. As they disembarked, the harsh, acrid air of Neros hit them like a physical blow. Odin pulled her hood up to shield her face from the dust and ash that swirled around them. Krell took the lead, his knowledge of the planet's layout invaluable as they made their way toward the camp. The mining camp was a grim sight. Thousands of workers toiled under the watchful eyes of Zorgon overseers, their bodies thin and broken from years of hard labor. The air was thick with the sounds of clanking machinery, shouted orders, and the occasional crack of a whip. Odin's heart ached as she watched the workers struggle under the weight of their burdens. She knew that her people were suffering just like this on Delta Prime, and it fueled the fire of her resolve. They had to succeed. There was no other option. They slipped into the camp under the cover of darkness, moving through the shadows to avoid detection. Patrick led them to a small, hidden entrance that Krell had found, a maintenance tunnel that would take them directly into the heart of the camp. Inside, the tunnel was cramped and foul-smelling, but it provided the cover they needed to reach the workers without being seen. As they emerged into the main camp, they saw the true extent of the Zorgon's cruelty. Workers were herded like animals into pens at the end of their shifts, their bodies bruised and battered from the day's labor. "This is madness," Odin whispered, her voice filled with horror. "How can they treat people like this?" Patrick's expression was grim. "This is what we're fighting against. This is why we have to win." Krell motioned for them to follow him, leading them to a small, hidden alcove where a group of workers were huddled together, whispering in the darkness. These were the leaders of the local resistance, a group of men and women who had been waiting for the right moment to strike back against their oppressors. When they saw Patrick and his companions, their eyes widened in surprise. They hadn't expected to see a human, let alone a Deltan, in their midst. "Who are you?" The workers demanded, his voice low and cautious. "We're here to help," Patrick replied, stepping forward. "We're building a resistance, and we need your help to take down the Zorgon." The workers exchanged wary glances, their skepticism evident. They had been fighting a losing battle for so long, and the idea of outsiders coming to their aid seemed too good to be true. "How do we know we can trust you?" another worker asked, her eyes narrowed. Odin stepped forward, pulling back her hood to reveal her face. "Because I'm one of you," she said, her voice steady. "I've seen the same suffering you have, lived through the same horrors. But I've also seen the hope that we can fight back. We have allies, resources, and a plan. We can do this, but we need your help." The workers studied her for a long moment, their expressions softening as they recognized the sincerity in her words. Finally, the leader of the group, a grizzled old man with a face lined by years of hardship, nodded slowly. "If you're serious about this, we'll stand with you," he said. "But you have to understand, we're risking everything. If the Zorgon find out, they'll kill us all." Patrick nodded, his expression solemn. "We know the risks, but if we don't fight now, We'll never have another chance. We have to take that risk." The leader extended his hand, and Patrick shook it firmly. "All right," the old man said. "Let's bring these bastards down." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity as the resistance prepared for the uprising. Patrick and Krell helped the workers organize their forces, distributing weapons and planning their attack. Odin worked tirelessly to rally the workers, her presence a beacon of hope in the darkness. The day of the uprising arrived, and the camp was a tinderbox ready to explode. The workers were armed and ready, their resolve steeled by the promise of freedom. As the Zorgan overseers made their rounds, they were met with fierce resistance. Blasters fired, fists flew, and the camp erupted into chaos. Patrick led the charge, his blaster blazing as he cut down the Zorgan guards who tried to quell the rebellion. Krell fought beside him, his strength and skill unmatched as he tore through the enemy lines. Odin was in the thick of it, her heart pounding with the thrill of battle. She had never fought like this before, but the rage and determination that fueled her gave her the strength she needed. She fought for her people, for the hope of a future free from oppression. The battle was fierce, but the workers fought with a desperation born of years of suffering. The Zorgan, caught off guard by the ferocity of the attack, began to fall back, their ranks crumbling under the onslaught. Finally, after hours of brutal fighting, the camp was theirs. The workers cheered as the last of the Zorgan fled, their victory a hard-won triumph. Patrick, Odin, and Krell stood in the center of the camp, surrounded by the cheering workers. They had done it. They had ignited the fire of rebellion, and it was spreading like wildfire. But they knew that this was just the beginning. The Zorgan would not take this defeat lightly, and the war was far from over. As they looked out over the liberated camp, Patrick placed a hand on Odin's shoulder. Proud smile on his face. "We did it," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "This is the start of something big. The Zorgan won't know what hit them." Odin nodded, her heart swelling with hope. "We'll keep fighting," she said, "until every one of our people is free." And with that, they set their sights on the next battle, ready to continue the fight for freedom. Word of the uprising on Neros spread quickly, igniting a wave of rebellions across the Zorgan-controlled worlds. The once feared empire was now facing a full-scale insurgency, with resistance cells rising up in every corner of their domain. The fire that Patrick, Odin, and Krell had sparked was now a raging inferno, threatening to consume the Zorgan Empire. But the Zorgan were not defeated yet. The Empire still had vast resources at its disposal, and they began to marshal their forces for a brutal crackdown. The resistance was gaining ground, but they were also facing an enemy that was growing more desperate and dangerous by the day. Patrick, Odin, and Krell knew that the time had come to take the fight to the next level. They had built a network of allies, gathered weapons and ships, and now they needed to strike a decisive blow against the Zorgan. The resistance was strong, but they needed a unifying force, a leader who could rally the disparate groups and lead them to victory. Odin, with her royal lineage and the prophecy that surrounded her, was the natural choice. She had grown into a fierce and capable leader, and the people looked to her with hope and admiration. But she was also aware of the immense responsibility that came with that role. As they prepared for their next mission, Odin sat alone in the freighter's cockpit, staring out at the stars. The weight of the prophecy and the expectations of her people weighed heavily on her shoulders. She had come so far, but the road ahead was filled with uncertainty. Patrick found her there, his presence a comforting one. He sat down beside her, sensing the turmoil in her heart. "You're worried," he said, his voice gentle. Odin nodded, not taking her eyes off the stars. "I have always believed that my people would be free one day, but now that we're so close, I'm scared, Patrick. What if I'm not the leader they need me to be?" Patrick reached out, taking her hand in his. "You've already proven yourself, Odin. You've inspired people to fight, to stand up for what's right. You've given them hope. That's what a leader does. But what if I fail? She whispered, her voice filled with doubt. Patrick squeezed her hand, his expression serious. We all have doubts, Odin, but you're not alone in this. We're all in this together, and we'll face whatever comes our way as a team. You've got the strength to lead us, and we'll be right there beside you. Odin looked at him, her eyes searching his face for reassurance. She saw the confidence and faith he had in her, and it gave her the strength she needed. Thank you, Patrick, she said, her voice steadying. I'll do my best, for my people, and for all of us. Patrick smiled, a warmth in his eyes. That's all anyone can ask for, and no matter what happens, we'll face it together. With renewed resolve, Odin stood up, ready to take on the challenge ahead. The resistance was growing stronger by the day, and they were ready to strike a blow that would shake the very foundations of the Zorgan Empire. Their next target was a key Zorgan stronghold, a fortress world where the Empire's leadership had gathered to plan their counterattack. If they could strike there, it would cripple the Zorgan's ability to coordinate their forces and give the resistance a critical advantage. The plan was audacious, but it was also their best chance to turn the tide of the war. The resistance forces would converge on the fortress world from multiple directions, launching a coordinated assault that would overwhelm the Zorgan's defenses. As they prepared for the mission, Odin took her place as the leader of the resistance. She addressed the gathered forces, her voice ringing with confidence and determination. This is our moment, she declared. We have fought long and hard to get here, and now we have the chance to strike a blow that will echo across the galaxy. The Zorgan have ruled through fear and oppression, but we have shown them that their power is not absolute. Together, we will bring down their empire and build a future where all people can live in freedom. The resistance forces cheered, their spirits lifted by Odin's words. They were ready to fight, ready to take the battle to the heart of the Zorgan Empire. The freighter's engines roared to life as they set course for the fortress world, the fleet of resistance ships following close behind. The gathering storm was about to break, and the Zorgan would soon feel the full fury of the rebellion they had tried to crush. As they streaked through space toward their target, Odin felt a sense of calm determination settle over her. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready to face whatever came their way. The Zorgan Empire had underestimated the strength of the oppressed, and now they would pay the price. The final battle was about to begin, and the future of the galaxy hung in the balance. The fortress world of Zorgan Prime loomed ahead, its defenses bristling with weapons and warships. The Zorgan had turned the planet into an impenetrable stronghold, a place where they believed they were untouchable, but the resistance was about to prove them wrong. The resistance fleet emerged from hyperspace, their ships fanning out into a battle formation. The Zorgan were ready for them, their warships already in position to intercept the attackers. But the resistance had come prepared. Patrick, Odin, and Krell led the charge, their freighter weaving through the enemy lines with the agility of a fighter. The resistance forces followed suit, their ships engaging the Zorgan fleet in a brutal dogfight. The sky above Zorgan Prime was lit up with the flashes of energy weapons and the explosions of destroyed ships. The battle was fierce, with both sides taking heavy losses, but the resistance was fighting with a determination born of desperation. They knew that this was their best chance to strike a decisive blow against the Zorgan Empire. On the ground, resistance forces had already begun their assault on the fortress itself. They had managed to land troops in key locations, using the chaos of the space battle to slip through the Zorgan's defenses. Odin led one of the ground teams, her heart pounding with adrenaline, as they fought their way toward the fortress gates. The Zorgan soldiers were well-trained and heavily armed, but the resistance fighters were driven by a fierce resolve. They pushed forward, taking out enemy positions one by one as they closed in on their target. As they reached the gates, Odin and her team encountered the heaviest resistance yet. The The Zorgan had fortified the entrance with a wall of energy shields and heavy artillery, and the air was thick with the sound of gunfire and explosions. "We need to take down those shields," Odin shouted over the din of battle, her voice barely audible over the roar of the fighting. Krell, who had been covering their advance with his heavy blaster, nodded. "I'll handle it. You focus on getting your people through those gates." Odin watched as Krell charged forward, his blaster blazing as he took out the Zorgan soldiers guarding the shield generators. He was a force of nature, his sheer strength and determination clearing a path for the rest of the team. With the shields down, Odin led her team in a final push toward the gates. They fought their way through the Zorgan defenders, their blasters cutting through the enemy lines with deadly precision. Finally, they reached the gates, and with a powerful charge, they breached the fortress's outer defenses. The resistance fighters poured through the opening, engaging the Zorgan soldiers in close-quarters combat as they pushed deeper into the fortress. Patrick, who had been coordinating the space battle from the freighter's cockpit, received word of the ground team's success. He knew that the battle was far from over, but the fact that they had managed to breach the fortress was a major victory. "Keep the pressure on them," he ordered, his voice firm. "We need to take control of the fortress and capture the Zorgan leadership. If we can cut off the head of the snake, the rest will fall." The battle raged on, both in space and on the ground. The resistance forces fought with everything they had, knowing that this was their moment of truth. The Zorgan were powerful, but they had underestimated the strength of those who fought for freedom. Inside the fortress, Odin and her team pushed toward the command center, where the Zorgan leadership was believed to be hiding. The halls were filled with the sounds of blaster fire and the shouts of combatants as the two sides clashed in a desperate struggle. As they reached the final chamber, Odin's heart pounded in her chest. This was it, the moment that would decide the future of the rebellion. The doors to the command center burst open, and Odin and her team stormed inside. The Zorgan leaders were there, surrounded by their elite guards. The room erupted into chaos as the resistance fighters engaged the enemy, the air filled with the crack of blaster fire and the hum of energy weapons. Odin fought her way through the melee, her blaster cutting down Zorgan soldiers with deadly accuracy. She had come so far, and she wasn't about to stop now. Finally, she reached the Zorgan leader, a towering figure clad in ornate armor. He turned to face her, his yellow eyes filled with a mix of rage and fear. "You dare challenge the might of the Zorgan Empire?" he hissed, his voice dripping with venom. Odin raised her blaster, her voice steady and filled with resolve. "Your empire is finished. The galaxy will no longer live under your tyranny." With a single, decisive shot, she brought the Zorgan leader down. The room fell silent as the remaining Zorgan soldiers, seeing their leader defeated, began to surrender one by one. The battle was over. The resistance had won. As the news spread, the remaining Zorgan forces across the galaxy began to crumble. The once mighty empire was now in disarray, its leaders captured or killed, and its forces scattered. The siege of Zorgan Prime was the final nail in the empire's coffin. The resistance had struck a blow from which the Zorgan would never recover. Patrick, Odin, and Krell stood in the aftermath of the battle, their hearts filled with a mix of relief and exhaustion. They had done it. They had brought down the Zorgan Empire and freed their people. But the victory came at a cost. The galaxy had been scared by the war, and there was much work to be done to rebuild and heal the wounds that had been inflicted. As they looked out over the ruins of the fortress, Odin felt a sense of hope for the future. They had won their freedom, and now it was time to build a new world, one where all people could live in peace and prosperity. The Zorgan Empire had fallen, and the galaxy was free. The fall of the Zorgan Empire marked the beginning of a new era for the galaxy. The Resistance, now recognized as the legitimate government, set about the monumental task of rebuilding the worlds that had suffered under the Zorgan's rule. The scars of the war were deep, but there was also a sense of optimism and hope for the future. and now a symbol of the Resistance's victory, was thrust into a leadership role she had never expected. The people looked to her for guidance, and she took up the mantle with a sense of duty and determination. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready to face the challenges with the same resolve that had carried her through the war. Patrick and Krell remained by her side, their bond stronger than ever. They had fought together, built together, and now they would work together to build a better future for the galaxy. The new government, composed of representatives from the various species that had joined the Resistance, was founded on principles of equality, justice, and cooperation. The days of tyranny and oppression were over, and a new dawn was rising. Odin spent her days working tirelessly to ensure that the transition to peace was as smooth as possible. She traveled to the far corners of the galaxy, meeting with leaders, listening to the concerns of the people, and working to heal the divisions that the war had created. Patrick, now a respected advisor and strategist, helped to rebuild the galaxy's defenses, ensuring that they would never again be caught off guard by a tyrannical empire. He also worked to establish trade routes and alliances, bringing prosperity to worlds that had long been isolated and impoverished. Krell, ever the warrior, took on the role of protector, ensuring that the new government was safe from any remnants of the Zorgan forces or other threats that might arise. His loyalty to Odin and Patrick was unwavering, and he became a trusted figure in the new order. As the years passed, the galaxy began to heal. The horrors of the war slowly faded into memory, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose and unity. The once enslaved Deltans and other oppressed species were now free to build their lives, and they did so with a determination that inspired the entire galaxy. Odin, Patrick, and Krell had become legends in their own time, their names spoken with reverence and gratitude by those who had benefited from their actions. But they never sought glory or recognition. They had done what needed to be done, and they were content to see the fruits of their labor in the peace and prosperity that now flourished. One day, as the three of them stood on the balcony of the newly built capital city, looking out over the bustling streets filled with people of all species working together, Odin smiled. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with pride and contentment. "We really did it." Patrick nodded, a satisfied grin on his face. "Yeah, we did. And it was worth every sacrifice." Krell, ever the stoic, simply nodded, his eyes scanning the horizon. But there was a warmth in his gaze that spoke volumes. As the sun set on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the city, the three of them stood together, knowing that they had accomplished something extraordinary. They had brought down an empire, freed the oppressed, and built a new world from the ashes of the old. The galaxy was entering a new dawn, and they were ready to face whatever the future held. For they had learned that together, they could overcome any challenge, and that the bonds of friendship and loyalty were the true foundation of a better world. And with that knowledge, they faced the future with hope, knowing that they had helped to create a galaxy where all beings could live in peace, freedom, and harmony. The journey was far from over, but they were ready for whatever lay ahead. The galaxy had been given a new dawn, and they were determined to make it one of hope, justice, and prosperity for all. If this story is complete, then simply yes.